Well, Georgia and Clemson, of course, a huge game. We all know that to start the season. It was announced earlier this week that the Dogs and Tigers will kick off at 7:30 in Charlotte, Bank of America Stadium. These will both be top five teams. I don't know who's going to get ranked higher than the other. That's kind of a good question right now. But the first betting line has come in, and it's not from a Las Vegas casino. It's from FanDuel, but it's still a line. So Clemson opens as a 3-point favorite over Georgia on a neutral field in Charlotte. My initial thoughts are that at least we have a set beginning here. I don't know that it will stay at 3. I talked with someone a little bit earlier today who dabbles in the world of betting, and they felt like it could go back and forth for a little bit, but it won't be Clemson -6 and Georgia -6. The other thing or Georgia -6. No one thinks that this line is going to settle anywhere above a field goal advantage for either team. A couple of things. These are beginning numbers. Those can often be off a little bit, or scattered is probably the better word for it. But I did think it was interesting. I think I know the reason why Clemson's favored, which is that a lot of money is going to, well, they were thinking a lot of money is going to go on Clemson at the start on these online places. I'll be curious to see how it goes as time goes on here. I'm not surprised necessarily, but again, it's the opening number. Those things can change pretty quick over time, and we're about 100 days away from it, something like that. What do you think about the line? There were some other lines that came out as well. Generally speaking, a lot of SEC lines. I think the Clemson line is about what you'd expect it to be, generally speaking. But the other Georgia lines, Georgia -21 at Tennessee, that seems like a lot to me. Georgia -10.5 at Auburn. That's a lot to give up on the road in the league to a team that's not rebuilding like Tennessee. Well, I guess they are rebuilding in a way, Auburn, not the way Tennessee is rebuilding. And then Georgia -8 over the Gators, which was the one that I was the most interested in. I actually think that could be a point or maybe a little bit higher. But that's probably in the ballpark of being right. If that were Georgia -4, I think that would be wrong. But you've got other lines to Alabama -15 at Florida, the Gators -15.5 at Tennessee, LSU -4 at Auburn, Alabama -13 at Texas A&M. That is, disrespectful in many ways. LSU -1.5. I think that game is at Florida. I could be wrong. And talk about disrespectful. Alabama -24 against LSU. A&M -8.5 against Auburn. The Gators -9.5 at Missouri. And then Alabama -18.5 at Auburn. So you're looking at Georgia being about a touchdown underdog to Alabama if you're keeping score with that, which is what, sort of good teams, good to solid teams have been against the Tide. That's what Ohio State was a year ago, somewhere in that ballpark when they lost the national championship game to Alabama. So with the Alabama game, I think if you're not a double-digit dog, you just kind of got to go into it saying, hey, we're just going to try to pull an upset. The other thing about, if Georgia does wind up being an underdog, and we'll just see when they officially become, that would be, just before the game. But, Georgia's done pretty well as an underdog under Kirby. When you think back, they were underdogs to Auburn at home in 2016. They were underdogs -5 at Notre Dame, won that game by a point, obviously. And there were a couple more I couldn't remember off the top of my head. One problem for Georgia is that they are so rarely an underdog that this is certainly notable. As a team, as a program under Kirby, they've only been underdog like 6 times since 2017. One of those was Notre Dame. One of those was 3 of those were Alabama, and one was LSU. That's just going off the top of my head. I'm trying to find here quickly the data for that. Clemson, on the other hand, very rarely has Clemson been a small underdog. Let's start with Clemson first. They have been a favorite in a slew of games lately, for sure, but they've only been a small favorite a couple of times since they've sort of been on their run. 2014, they were a 2-point a 2-point favorite to Georgia Tech and lost the game straight up. They were a 3-point favorite at home to Notre Dame, didn't cover the line, but won the game 24-22. The 2017 game against Louisville, they were a 3-point favorite and won going away. And they were a 2-point favorite in their win over Ohio State in 2019. The game with Justin and Trevor, where Ohio State, where Justin threw the interception at the end of the game. For Georgia to be an underdog at Kirby, let's just say with Kirby, that's only happened from 2017 on. That's only happened 5 times, 3 of which have come against Alabama. So obviously they lost all 3 of the Alabama games. They lost to LSU as a 7-point dog in the SEC championship game. They beat Notre Dame. They beat TCU as a dog. They beat Auburn as a dog. So they have had quite a few wins over the years as underdogs with Kirby Smart. I mean, I'm counting 3. And they've only been an underdog in that time since late 2016 on. They've only been an underdog 7 times. So 3 of the times they've won it, which is interesting. I mean, I think if you want to have a special season, and there's no certainty that anyone will ever have a special season, because special seasons don't just come around. If they were all the time, they wouldn't be special, right? But you got to have a win that matters. And starting at the beginning of the season with this Clemson game, I think no matter who winds up being the favorite, I think this is an extremely important game for Georgia, because there will be excuses made for Clemson if they lose this game. They'll still wind up in the playoff if they lose this game, because they'll win the ACC. There's really no one in their way unless North Carolina can trip them up, and I just don't buy that. For Georgia, the path is significantly more difficult. You start talking about, and I don't think they'll lose this game, but at Auburn, you're playing in Jacksonville against the Gators, and then obviously you'd have to play in the SEC championship game against probably Alabama just to get to the Final Four. So this really is a more important game for Georgia. I don't, for Clemson, their 2021 team is going to get a lot of benefit of the doubt for what their teams from 2015 to 2020 have done. And the fact of the matter is, just like every other team, what happened in 2020 doesn't matter in 2021. And the best example, if you're talking of Clemson, is what happened to them against Ohio State. So Georgia will be a slight dog to the Tigers if this holds, which we don't know if it will. We're, again, 100 days away from the game. But we'll see how. We will be tracking this. It would be interesting to find out and watch. Clemson opens as a 3-point favorite. What do you think? Tell me down below. We'll see you over on the website, dawgpost.com.